Chatterbox Reds, I mean, it's one of the, 10 most popular shows, baseball shows, right?
Yeah. Yep.
In the world. And a big reason why is Nick Kirby. I mean, there he is. He never leaves that joint. Is that your basement, Nick, or is that the ground floor? What do you got going there in that man cave studio of yours?
Hey, Thom, that's the basement.
Do you have any natural light down there, or you just sit down there and like just you dissect everything that is all Reds?
No, I got about 3 windows down here. So, yeah, it's like just barely the top of the basement still sees daylight. So.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let's start with, I made the comment in the monologue, and I remember when I was doing the Diamondbacks, we had this guy that was this journeyman minor league player, and I can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name. Robert, I can see him right in front of my eyes right now. Anyway, when the Diamondbacks won the World Series in 2001, and, they had Randy Johnson and Kurt Schilling and all these guys, right, and all these stars at all these position veteran players, not like the Reds players. But a couple guys went down that year during the regular season, and they bring this guy up who's this journeyman pitcher, getting to the big leagues at like 30 years old. And all of a sudden, this guy rips off like 3 months or 2.5 months where he is just spectacular. He's going 6 innings every game. He's giving up 2 runs or 3 runs. And, he becomes a big fan favorite and all that kind of thing. And I made the comment, those are the kinds of things that happen when it turns into that quote-unquote special or magical year, right? I bring it all up because of a guy like Kennedy yesterday. I mean, this guy's pitching independent league baseball, right? 2 months ago somewhere in New Jersey. It's an incredible story.
Robert Ellis, was that your guy in 2001?
Robert Ellis, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nick.
Yeah. Looked it up. Yeah, I mean, look, you're spot on. These are the kind of players, the kind of performances you need in a year like this. If the Reds are going to be, as I think they are, ahead of schedule to this point, you need guys like Kennedy to hold the line. As we kind of inch closer to the Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo potential returns, it's like it keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I feel like the closer you get to Green and Lodolo, the more realistic the Reds' chances are of actually pulling this thing off.
When you talk about Green and Lodolo, though, Nick, we're not hearing much about Hunter Green unless there's something that I missed about realistically what his timetable might look like. He's been out long enough now where they have to send him out at least for 1 or 2 starts in the minor leagues before he'd come back and rejoin this rotation, right?
Yeah, I mean, Lodolo and Green are both in Arizona rehabbing now. They are throwing there. I'm sure both of those guys would have several rehab starts.
Especially Lodolo. He might max out on 20 days, 21 days, right?
Yeah, but the Reds are saying they think they could be early August. So the fact that they're both throwing at this point is encouraging. Haven't heard anything saying they've had any sort of setbacks or anything. That's all certainly a possibility. But yeah, I mean you're getting closer. That's kind of been the thing that you've looked at this Reds team and you said, oh, is this pitching going to be able to piece together enough wins? And they just keep hanging around. They just keep hanging around. They keep winning. And you keep getting closer to those guys returning, get closer to the trade deadline when maybe you could at least bring a veteran in or something like that. And every day this keeps going, the more realistic it feels.
It really does. I mean, I'm just amazed by their resiliency when they fall behind and the other team will get a couple runs and then they find a way. And look, it's one of the oldest, cliches in sports, but they are the very definition of it seems to be a different guy every night. You know what I mean?
They have a playoff caliber lineup. I mean,
Yeah.
there's not holes in the lineup. The Reds just optioned Stuart Fairchild to AAA. Like Stuart Fairchild, for a lot of the Reds teams over the last decade, would have been starting playing every single day and would have been a fine player. and right now he's excess. And that just speaks volumes, I think, to the lineup and the talent that they've brought in. The pitching needs to catch up a little bit to that, but your top two pitchers are out right now. So it's really remarkable how quickly they've turned around the offense, because last year the offense was not good, especially after like they traded Tommy Pham. Like that offense in the second half was rough, and for it to be this good, this quick is really just remarkable.
Now is when you start to talk about, and I bring this up frequently with the Bengals, and the Reds aren't where the Bengals are yet, but they're certainly, marching in that same direction of where your roster gets to be so good. And now you really need to start making, you can't worry about feelings, hurt feelings, and things like that. I mean, David Bell a couple of times has already pinch hit for Joey Votto. I don't know if Votto is upset about it. He's the kind of guy that will never say anything about it. He's a team-first guy. And people try to, do their Freudian interpretations of what happens to Votto's face when they show him after getting pinch hit for standing there in the dugout. That's above my pay scale. But what I'm getting at is whether it's pinch hitting for Votto or how much rope do you give De La Cruz against left-handed pitching? Now, I know you don't see a lot of left-handed pitching, but look, these are the kinds of things you have to start at least thinking about if you want to win games and get in the playoffs. Newman has done very well against left-handed pitching, right? And I mean, Newman's done a lot of good things for this team. I know there were people early in the year beating him up a little bit. I thought he was a rock-solid player with the Pirates, and he has been everything the Reds could have asked for, in my opinion. Not a perfect player, but a good, solid player, a contributing player to a winning team. Little things like that, Nick, I mean, how much rope you give, let's start with that. How much rope you giving De La Cruz against left-handed pitching?
Well, Ellie De La Cruz is just a different player because of just how many ways he can impact the game. I think you keep running him out there every day. Maybe you strategically, Thom, try to get his off days against left-handed pitching as much as you can. I do not think Ellie De La Cruz needs to play every single game the rest of the season. I think the Reds have to be very careful and mindful of they have a lot of players that have never played anywhere close to a 162-game season. So you don't want to wear them out. So use the depth that you have. The Reds have really incredible depth. And like you said, I'm a big Kevin Newman fan too. I think he's the kind of player that a playoff team needs to have on their bench, a guy that you can bring in and he can perform well. He performs very, very well against left-handed pitching, but he can also sit on the bench for 4 or 5 days, and it's not going to impact him. It's not going to be one of these things where he's like a guy that needs to get at bats per se, but like Stuart Fairchild they just sent down, where he's going to need. He's still young. He still needs to develop a little bit offensively. He can't just sit on the bench for 5 days. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's just kind of how they have to approach this. Is just be mindful of these players that are going through this grind for the first time, and then just use that bench that is one of the best benches I've ever seen in Cincinnati.
Yeah, so far, and they've played like it. If they're pinch hitting for somebody, again, you talk about tweaks, Nick, and I get to thinking about this, looking at their lineup. Now, India had a good game yesterday. He had 3 hits, had 2 home runs. Okay, that's fine, but he's really been struggling. I mean, really, really been struggling. I started to think of myself, and every fan likes to do this in every city. It's not just Cincinnati, and I really don't beat the drum on this much, but when it comes to tinkering with your lineup a little bit, I see TJ Friedl hitting down there in the 7-hole, and I'm saying to myself, you can make a case this guy's been the best hitter, him or Steer, and McLean in a fewer number of games. But when a guy like India or anybody else, could be anybody, but in this case it's just India. I want to see Friedl get more at bats. I don't want to miss an at bat from Friedl, right? Where he might get a 5th at bat or a 4th at bat instead of just 3 at bats in a game. I mean, am I right? Am I wrong? Am I just sounding crazy about that or no?
I think in Friedel's case, he's only batting lower in the lineup against left-handed pitching. And Friedel's one of the rare birds. He's probably the only left-handed batter on this team that I think could actually be an above-average hitter against left-handed pitcher.
Yeah, I agree.
No disrespect to the other guys, but Friedel's he's proven that. He proved that in the minor leagues. I think Friedel batting lower in the lineup against left-handed pitching is more about guys like Kevin Newman and Nick Senzel, that they have hit left-handed pitching very, very well, and you want to make sure they get some at-bats against that left-handed pitcher. So you make it a little bit more difficult for the opposing manager, where they have to face Kevin Newman maybe 3 times with their lefty, like Patrick Corbin on the mound. I think it's more about those guys than necessarily about a TJ Friedel himself.
Okay, I want to ask you a little bit about Abbott, because it's been brought up in the chat, and I was looking at this, in fact, the other day. You know, a big thing, Thom Verducci was a guy, I think, that was given credit at Sports Illustrated for writing this article a number of years ago. With all the rash of Tommy John elbow injuries, they've come back in full force again this season in Major League Baseball. We've seen a ton of them. And teams not wanting to increase the number of innings in young pitchers from one year to the next year. And I bring up Andrew Abbott. In 2022, which was really his first extended year, okay, after he was drafted, he first came out, and he's, at Virginia, and then he goes immediately to Dayton in 21. And because of when he signed in the College World Series, he was only around for a total of, in 21, 8, 9, 10 starts. Okay, so now comes 2022. He pitches a total in 2022, 2 teams, single A and double A, of 118 innings total. That's in 22. In 23, he pitches for 3 teams, right? And so far, and so you go 3 teams. You go Chattanooga, Louisville, Cincinnati. Okay. He's knocking on the door right now, right around 100 innings. So far this season, those 3 stops combined. Does that become an issue as this season goes on? I mean, you got basically an entire second half of the season to go. And what do they say? You want to increase 10, 12, 15% from the year before? Is that right?
I think 20% is about the max.
Okay. All right. So that's going to become a factor, or is it?
Yeah, I don't think Andrew Abbott, unless he got hurt, God forbid, would make a playoff start for the Reds. I think they probably would shut him down before then. I think probably with Abbott, their hope is that he can get you to Green and Lodolo, that he can get you those guys back, and not just back, but those guys several starts in. I think I did the math on that. I think you're probably looking at mid-September is when he'd hit 150 innings, which I think would probably be about the max. I can't see the Reds going more than 150. But I don't know. I mean, maybe the Reds, I think, evaluate each of these players differently, and maybe they see something with Andrew Abbott. They have so much into their performance enhancement. I know David Bell was talking on the pregame show the other day about how they've actually started late arrivals to the ballpark and making when these players come in more efficient. Yep. And that's a thing of pride for them.
Yeah.
So maybe, maybe they see something Andrew Abbott and say, hey, we don't think him going to 160, 170 would be all that big of a deal, where maybe a guy like Nick Lodolo, who's had injuries, would be a big deal. But my gut tells me he's probably going to get shut down at 150, probably looking at mid-September if they're able to maybe skip a start here and there. And that's probably what we're looking at.
Well, I tell you, there would be – I hate even speculating on it. But there would be anarchy in this town if the Reds all of a sudden hit September and Abbott's still dealing and you're going to shut this guy down. I mean, there will be – and you see both sides. I mean, look, you understand both sides. You want the guy around for the long haul. But, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The All-Star snubs, we're going to get into this throughout the rest of the show. I felt Steer, by far, of all the Reds players, by far, was the biggest snub. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Matt McClain's, I think, only played 45 games, so it's hard to realistically get all that mad about that. I think Steer gets undervalued by a lot of metrics, like wins above replacement. I think he's only like at 1.9 by Fangraphs WAR.
All right, I'm
And
going to interrupt you right there, okay? I'm going to interrupt you because I want you to walk through, for people that have not bought into analytics and some of these statistics like WAR, okay? Walk somebody through the novice. And you don't have to get into all the numbers and all the things that necessarily make up determining WAR, wins above replacement. But, look, the eye test would say to somebody, this dude's a freaking stud. He's just getting it done. I mean, every day will change positions. The guy's a gamer. He's a winner. He gets big hits. He's been productive all year long. What does WAR mean for Spencer Steer?
Well, WAR in general would be calculating your offensive production, your defensive production, and your base running, and trying to put that all into one statistic. Where Spencer Steer gets punished, and I don't think it's fair to him, is the defense, because he hasn't necessarily played good defense at any position. But the fact that he's played multiple positions and the Reds have been able to put him in different spots, I think makes him more valuable. And I think that's probably why his wins above replacement calculation is not really a fair evaluation of him in himself, because it doesn't calculate that you play different positions. And when you play first base like he did, that actually it's position adjusted. So a player that plays first base gets punished versus a player that plays shortstop, because obviously most players that play first base can't play shortstop. And so a shortstop's more valuable. So you're trying to calculate how many wins a player would bring to your team over a replacement level player, which is basically like a player you bring up from the minor leagues. That's just kind of your average baseline player. So, but in Spencer Steer's case, I think he kind of gets punished. I do.
We lost you. We lost him. What happened, Nick? I mean, what the hell's going on there?
Did you unplug your mic?
Did he unplug his mic?
He's out again.
Oh, no.
I don't know. We got to have Nick because he's back on
Try it
tonight.
again, Nick. Try it again, Nick.
Oh, no. I think
Okay.
Elliot cut the cord.
Oh, keep going. Keep going, Nick. Keep saying stuff.
How are we doing?
Go ahead. Try again. You back?
Am I back?
Yeah, you go ahead. Go ahead. Thank you.
The cat actually got in my cord and
There you go. I used to tell my teachers that in school. Oh, we lost him again. The cat's back in there. We love animals here on the program, though, so we're not going to suggest anything bad with an animal here.
Correct.
No, never. All
right.
All right, you kind of tried it one more time here.
Low.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. So you were saying about Steer.
Yeah, so I think he kind of gets punished on some of the metrics, but I do think, though, this is kind of a blessing for the Reds, that these guys like Spencer Steer aren't going to the All-Star game. It's in Seattle. I think most of these guys could probably really use this rest. Spencer Steer's never played a 162-game season, so while it really stinks for a guy like him, you never know when he's going to get another opportunity to be an All-Star. I hope that he does, but we've seen players that Spencer Steer could end up just being a guy that maybe is like an 850 OPS the rest of his career, which is a really good player, but it's never really maybe enough to get him into an All-Star game. Thom, I do have one thing for you, though.
Yes.
I don't like the way that we pick All-Stars. I think that we should look at the last 365 days of players instead of looking at the first almost 6 weeks a lot of times by the time I think the ballots come out. I feel like a guy like Joey Votto really got punished on this because he had a lot of slow starts. I think he wasn't even an All-Star in 2017, the year he finished second in MVP. Mm-hmm. So I wish that when Major League Baseball put up these All-Star ballots, that they would put out the stats when they're, when you're selecting the players that were over the last 365 days. So I think that'd be a way more fair way to evaluate the players.
Well, I mean, I think that's a very interesting point. I've never heard that before, and I think there's certainly a lot of validity to that because guys, whether it's a guy like Votto who traditionally 17 wasn't the only year. I mean, traditionally, he was always a very slow starter to seasons in March and April and into May. And there are other guys that get hurt, and all of a sudden they come back, and they're just tearing it up, but their stats don't compare to some guy who's played in 75 games as opposed to 45 games. So, I think there's definitely validity to that. It would prevent, the flip side of that is, if you were considering putting a guy, let's say, like McLean, who's only played in 45 games this year, obviously you would have nothing except minor league numbers to base that on for the following year. So, but I get what you're saying, and I think it's a valid point. I think it's a good idea. But, McLean's another guy, though. I mean, Arcia is a guy who, when he first came up, everybody thought he was going to be a really good player. And he's been a good player. There were some people that thought he was going to be a great player. He had his ups and downs in Milwaukee, but he was solid. I mean, he got in some issues with Craig Counsell there about hustling and all these kind of things. But he's gone to Atlanta, flourished. He deserves to go to the All-Star game. But, I mean, heck, McLean's numbers are almost as good as his in 45 games.
I mean, I think they're significantly better, to be honest. Yeah, it's just it's hard to really get too upset about a guy that's only played 45 games not getting selected. And again, very selfishly, I think it's actually for the Reds' benefit. So I'm not going to be all that upset. And a lot of this stuff does, I think, even itself out, Thom. I think in 2014, I think the Reds had 4 All-Stars, and I think they were like in 4th place or something like that. So there's going to be years where you're maybe not as good of a team, but you have just a bunch of guys that put up all-star numbers and they'll kind of get in. So hopefully these guys do all get another opportunity down the line. That'd be the only way it would kind of stink is if a guy like Steer never gets another opportunity.
All right, the last thing I want to ask you about, last 2 things. Because, look, I've been banging this drum, Nick. I mean, you haven't been with me on this. That's okay. That's okay. You haven't been with me on this, and it wouldn't be the first time. My wife is not with me on the overwhelming majority of topics that we discuss. So this is nothing new in my life, and especially with 2 teenage kids. Actually, our daughter just left being a teenager over the weekend, into 20. And that's just this proposition or this idea, Nick, of you got to go out and make a move. You can't wait around on the possibility of Lodolo. I mean, I've said from the beginning, I didn't believe what they said. Turned out to be true. Hunter Green, I still don't believe what they said. I mean, the guy was supposed to miss 1 start. He got backed up 1 start, 7 days. Then all of a sudden he makes a start, and then he's out. There's no way that they can go to August hoping for Williamson. I know they get Lively coming back, and he's been all right. But, Williamson and Weaver and now Kennedy, I mean, they can't do it, Nick. They got to make a move and get somebody in here as a starter. Don't they? Come on.
I agree. They need to get some starting pitching. I don't think they're going to do it till the deadline. I still don't think there's been a starting pitcher traded since the beginning of May in baseball. So I think any team right now, you're going to be significantly overpaying. And I just think that's a bad recipe for the Reds long term. You do have, thankfully, the All-Star break that's going to kind of help buy you a little bit of time next week. And you can manipulate your pitching rotation against Milwaukee in that second series. I agree that I think assuming things continue to at least stay close to where they're at by the end of July, they need to make a move. I don't think they should be looking to trade any significant prospects this year. I stand on that. I think they need to stay the course with their plan that's been ahead of schedule. But I don't know why you wouldn't go out and try to get a veteran like a Lance Lynn. I've mentioned a million times. That's probably not going to cost you a lot in prospects. Just going to be taking on salary. The Reds should be able to afford that. They've had significantly better gate attendance than I'm sure they were projecting this year.
Yep.
Hopefully you could use that for a guy like Lance Lynn. And I think they're going to need pitching even if Green and Lodolo do come back healthy. Because what's the worst case scenario is everyone magically stays healthy. Well, you move Luke Weaver to the bullpen. You move Brandon Williamson to the bullpen. Or you send him down to AAA for a couple starts and keep him stretched out, and he can come back up when there is the next injury. So, yeah, I don't think even Green and Lodolo changes any of the calculations in terms of their need for a start. Because I think they're going to need starting pitching one or two, probably no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I love the art. And look, there are a lot of Jim Bowden detractors out there, but I have always said, and you get a grin on your face on that, and I'm being very sincere when I say this. There are a lot of people that don't like Bowden, and there's some people that do. I always thought in the years when Marge Schott was spending some money, and make no mistake, there were a lot of years there where for our size market, Marge was spending a lot of money. And then all of a sudden things changed literally overnight. But, in 95, now they had some veteran players on that team in 95. But, I mean, they go out, they hit the lottery with Pete Sherrick coming back from injury. He was one of the top pitchers in the league. And I know we're going way back before a lot of people were even born. But when he went out and swung that deal and brought in, he brings in Mark Portugal. He brings in David Wells. He brings in, I mean, you are talking about monster deals here to try and get a team to not only get to the World Series, but to win the World Series. Now, it didn't work out that way because all of a sudden in 95 they couldn't hit in the LCS against Atlanta. But Bowden even made the in the Athletic over the weekend. He said, look, the Reds got what it takes here, and they're a couple of pitchers away from making it happen and shocking everybody in October. If I'm Nick Krall, I'd do it. I mean, I'd do it. Nobody can tell me that you're guaranteed, even with all these fleet of young stars, potentially. Nobody can make me believe, because they can't. There's no slam dunk you're going to be in this spot next year or the year after or the year after. There's no guarantees. Why not go for it?
Because you don't want to be on the other end of the Tyler Mahle deal. Tyler Mahle's
one deal, Nick. It's one deal. You don't have to give 3 guys away or 2 guys away, but you can piece together some action here and make something happen where you get a couple of guys. It may not be at the level of where David Wells was back in 95 or Portugal with the Giants back in 95. You may not get those kind of guys, but you can get some guys, because if this team has guys that can go 6 and give up 3, they are going to win a ton.
We think, we hope. We don't know how a lot of these players are going to react to late in the season. I think that's I'm steadfast on not doing anything to risk mortgaging the future for this year. I think what's happened this year has been great. I think the Reds have been insanely ahead of schedule. I think there's so much talent in the Reds minor league system that the guys that we see now are just the beginning of that. And I think the Reds can't be making mistakes. The Reds they do not have the margin of error that teams like the Dodgers have, where they can give away Yordan Alvarez for Tony Watson and still recover from that. Yeah, if the Reds did that, they're screwed. So I think overall they probably should be staying the course. I'm a guy that I've watched a lot of bad baseball with the Reds. I don't want this to be the only year. I want this to be the beginning of a long stretch. And
certainly
the small market teams that have had success have been prospect hoarders. They very rarely trade away their prospects. I think the Reds would be better off trading major league talent at the deadline for some additions. All
right, give me one name. You give me a big name. One guy with a major league club right now that you'd say, okay, I'm willing to let this guy go to try to get a pitcher in here.
Jonathan India.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the kind of player that would be better to be looking at trading, a guy that only has a couple years of control left. You're trading him probably when he's closer to his peak value. And you're not trading guys that you still have a whole 6 years of. So I think that's the way. I don't know if Jonathan India, though, is necessarily going to bring back another major league caliber, but maybe you could swing 2 deals where you trade Jonathan India for some minor leaguers, and then you could trade some minor leaguers for a pitcher. I think that's the way maybe you would look at it. But overall, I'm very firm and stay the course. I think that's the Reds' best path long term.
Okay. All right. Well, Nick, we thank you as always. You're on tonight, right? I mean, Trace is traveling around. Elliot, are you joining him tonight?
Yeah, I'll be making my debut with Nick tonight.
Wow.
it's going to be just an hour and a half of Jonathan India, don't trade him talk. Right, Nick?
He's going to hit 4 home runs tonight. I guarantee it now.
That's always the best time to trade him, after they hit 4 home runs in a game, right? Yeah. That should happen with Scooter Jeanette that night, right? The next day, they trade him. All right, Nick, good luck with the show tonight. Thanks for the time today, and we'll catch up soon.